All right, folks. Well, welcome to the Hump Day Hangar Presentations, sponsored by supercub.org and the Not So Straight and Level podcast. Supercub.org, we have a bunch of awesome members who help each other with all kinds of things, from building airplanes to picking out what grill to use to fixing an outboard motor. So they'll help you too. So check it out. I want to thank all of our supporting members and advertisers for making these Hump Day presentations possible. Of course, a huge thanks to the presenters, and last but certainly not least, all of you in the audience today. Next week, we have Dick Williams, which I know some of you know him, a longtime pilot, author, backcountry instructor, and he's going to share with us about flying in Idaho, and a book that he recently co-wrote with Amy Hoover called Mountain Canyon and Backcountry Flying is sort of rapidly becoming the new backcountry Bible. So you won't want to miss that. He's also got some great photos and stuff. If you're watching this on YouTube Live, we're going to try to watch the chats later on and answer questions you have when we get to the Q&A time. If you're on Zoom, you can use the chat function or raise your hand when we get to Q&A to ask the Jeffs from Wisconsin any of your questions. So also, if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and click that subscribe button if you want to, and it'll alert you to future presentations. So Jeff Russell and Jeff Plantz have been hangar neighbors at the Maury Airport for over 10 years. Jeff Plantz built the PA-14 on amphibs you'll see in the photos, and Jeff has owned and flown a number of different airplanes. His spouse, Patty, of 43 years, is also a pilot. Jeff has worn many hats, from volunteer ski patrols, school counselor, small business retail owner, and med tech on mobile MRI units. Jeff Russell flies a Super Cub and a Cirrus out of the same airport, which is in Middleton, Wisconsin. The young Jeff was exposed to general aviation while flying with his dad in their Cherokee 235, but it wasn't until 1998 that Jeff finally took flight lessons and became a pilot. After a long career in manufacturing, Jeff now spends his time volunteering for the RAF and flying his Super Cub around the lower 48, Canada, and Alaska on either bush wheels, floats, or skis. His favorite destinations include northern Wisconsin, Idaho, Montana backcountry, and Alaska. When not aviating, Jeff enjoys fly fishing, sailboat racing, and bicycling. His girlfriend of 34 years, Rhonda, enjoys their flights in the backcountry and is presently a student pilot. Welcome, Jeff and Jeff.
Well, thanks for having us, Steve. We're excited to be here.
I'm going to let you take it away.
Well, great. Let me see if I can't figure out how to share my screen here. And let's see what happens. Which one are you seeing?
I am seeing a big slide that says two Cubs to Alaska.
Oh, you are, but it's on. So I'm going to look at an opposite screen. It's on the wrong screen. So you're going to see I'm not going to be looking right at the camera, but that's all right.
That's all right.
Well, hey, everyone, we're just excited to share. Jeff Plantz and I had an opportunity in 2018 to fly our Cubs up to Alaska. And it was an absolutely epic adventure. We had a spectacular time. We left in July 4th of 2018, and we got back late the first week in August. So we spent 4 or 5 weeks up there, and it was more adventure than we could ever have imagined. And some of you have seen some of the pictures, but I'm gonna fire through here. I have about 150 some slides we do, and we're gonna do our best to share presenting it. Mr. Plantz, jump in where you can.
Okay.
We just have a shot here. We're up on the Fireweed airstrip outside of McCarthy at the two planes. It's a little bit into the trip. It was a beautiful strip. So prior to the trip, we were brainstorming the idea of doing a trip, and we said, well, we got to do a recon trip. And we decided to head up for the Airman's Show and do a little recon up in Alaska to prep for the bigger trip. And it was a great recon trip. We met up with a lot of good supercub.org folks and made a lot of connections and learned a lot about what we needed to do and what to prep for on the trip. we got connected with a Super Cub org guy, Gary McCarthy. Gary goes by AKPT on the site. I know he doesn't post a lot, but he's on there checking things out. He's a great guy. He's a Minnesotan originally, but he's been in Alaska for most of his life, and he's an avid sheep hunter. Gary offered to take us on a flight up the Kennecott while we were up there, and Gary's got the third seat option. Luckily, we had a third person that was right size to fit in the third seat. And
it's kind of fun.
It was a spectacular, beautiful trip. And for those people, maybe we have some people from Alaska already on here and others. I mean, it's right out the back door of Anchorage, and it's just a spectacular area to fly. You know, multiple glaciers coming down, you know, all right in, you know, next to each other. Just a gorgeous area. And lo and behold, we meet up with other supercub.org members. Here's Eric Hutchins from Minnesota, who was up there. He met us out. He connected with a friend of his and met us out on, I think we're on the chicken strip this day. And it was just a spectacular day in May. And this is Eric's friend, Don DeVoe, who's from Alaska, and then Gary McCarthy on the left. Again, just had a fantastic day out on the chicken strip and flying around that area. So July 4th comes, and we are in Wisconsin, say Madison, Wisconsin, South Central Wisconsin, and we decided to take a route that pretty much goes diagonal through Canada. You know, it's interesting that, you know, fuel prices back then with the exchange rate, 75 cents US to the Canadian dollar. Fuel was about the same price in Canada in US dollars as it was in the US. So we just said, heck, we don't need to, you know, one of the options was to stay in the US for a longer time and then head up further west, but we just took a straight, you know, kind of a diagonal across Canada up into Alaska, and, you know, it turned out great. We're not going to get into all the details of kind of how to get up there and what to do to get up there. There's some really good resources out there. Ted Waltman has a site, you guys, and you'll see it in the next page. That's an absolutely great site. In fact, Ted shared a lot of the information that's on his site with us in 2018, and it was really, you know, it was really great. He was a super help on planning our trip. That's a real quick on the route. I just put it in the, not going to go through it, but it's in the presentation. You can look at it in the future. Here's a quick plug for Ted, because again, Ted shared a lot of this information with us, and now he's put together this fantastic site that really lays out, you know, how to fly to Alaska, and then he's got some great things about the McCarthy area, Wrangell St. Elias, and I'm really impressed with what he put a lot of work into this thing. So here's a little, as you might imagine, on a trip as far as this is, we ran into a few weather events here and there. Here's a, I don't know, I forgot what they call this cloud, but it was impressive. The updraft in front of this cloud was the strongest updraft I've ever been in. It was amazing. So we crossed the border at a place called International Peace Garden. It's about midway east to west on the North Dakota border. It's really a nice place to cross. I know I offered some information on it that maybe Ted can add it to his site. It's cool because it's a road crossing. So there's 24/7 customs on both sides of the road. There's a strip there, and the strip's on the border. One ramp is in Canada, one ramp's in the US. And what's really cool is Canada does not require any prior notification. They say call them 10 minutes out on the radio and you land, and they clear you. So it's a really neat place to clear customs. Here's another picture of just us at the sign at the International Peace Garden. And we did not go into the gardens, but I guess there's spectacular gardens there as well. Here's a shot, and I don't remember, Jeff Plantz, do you remember what airport this was? My comment on this is every once in a while. Battleford?
Yeah.
every once in a while, there's an airport with a ladder that's appropriate for an amphib. Not very often. And here we are a little farther, Watson Lake. It seems like no matter which way you go, unless you're on the coast or the Cassiar Highway, you're going to go through Watson Lake. And just some really cool old, an old hangar here. You can't see it, but there's a Super Cub fuselage all balled up in front of the hangar. That was a little interesting. This is a little farther past Watson Lake, and these are these Canadian lakes that are just northeast of Haines and Skagway. These are some of the most beautiful lakes. I remember flying over these and seeing these. The picture does not do them justice. They are absolutely breathtaking. And I want to go back. I just want to explore this area sometime. You know, we flew over it, we flew through it, but it was really a beautiful area. Here's another picture as we're flying through the valleys, and one more. So here we are. This is salt water ahead. So we're coming through the pass just northeast of Skagway. And that is, and I can't, it's a named strait. I can't remember the name of it right now, but it's the salt water coming up. And we flew down to it and took a sharp left and around the corner and landed at the Skagway Airport to clear customs. Here's a picture of kind of the area, just an overview. Let me see if I can't. There's this laser pointer thing. Is that working? So we flew down here into Skagway and Haines. We were hoping to hang out here. We did really, really well timing wise. Believe it or not, we had a tailwind the whole way from Wisconsin up to here. And we made it here in 30 some hours. So 3 days of flying, we were way ahead of schedule, and we're in Alaska. So now we're thinking, hey, we want to maybe we were going to hang around the Southeast Alaska a little bit and explore. We hadn't really planned on it. Our one commitment was to be in McCarthy on the 16th. But heck, this is the 6th. I think we had 10 days and we wanted to hang around. Well, we get a weather report that says a low pressure system is coming in off the Gulf of Alaska. It's going to be IFR for the next 7 to 9 days. We said, okay. So we stayed one night in Haines and we got the heck out of there before we got locked in for a lot longer than we wanted to. We tried to fly up behind Haines up the Chilkat Pass, and there was no getting through by the time it was already coming down. So we ended up flying up and over Glacier Bay and then out, and we took the coast all the way up. It was a really interesting flight. There's a little picture of kind of of our route and where we went. From Haines down here, Gustavus, up the coast, Yakutat, and then up further. Our goal that day was to go to Cordova, but we got a little sidetracked as we saw the weather was improving. Here's some of the glaciers that we flew by that day. This is coming up the glacier into Glacier Bay. This is a little higher on that same glacier where the sky's opening up a little bit. And now we're flying out. This is actually flying out onto the coast. This is kind of coming out of Gustavus. And you can see that, it was a little scuzzy of a day with variable ceilings, to say the best. And here's another glacier that we flew by that day. There's Mr. Plantz's altimeter as we're flying up the coastline. You can see that maybe the clouds were a little low that day. The visibility was unlimited, so there was no issue there. And there's nothing to hit up there, but it was definitely low for parts of the trip. Just another glacier that we flew up, and I'm not even sure which one this was right now, but another beautiful glacier. Yeah, there's an example of some of the weather that we encountered. challenging at times. And another beautiful glacier coming down. This, I think, is these are the icebergs coming off the tip of the Fairweather Glacier that we flew up again along the coast. Just spectacular scenery, right? Even with low overcast, you know, the sights that we're seeing are things we've never seen before, and it just was you know, I can't recommend, you know, more to get up here. So we're flying along the coast, and we're thinking we want to get to Cordova. And Cordova just was a spot we thought we'd go. Well, we look out over Icy Bay. We're flying up to Icy Bay, and you can kind of see here where we make a turn. But we look up the far side of Icy Bay, and it's really scuzzy. It's low ceilings. And in the distance across the backside of Icy Bay, there's a shaft of sunlight coming down, bathing the Yahtzee Glacier, which we didn't know the name at the time, but we're like, oh, well, we're going to McCarthy. That's kind of the direction we want to go. We had lots of fuel. We said, well, let's go check it out. Let's just go fly back there and see what happens. Well, we flew across Icy Bay and we got over to the Yahtzee Glacier, and the sky opened up. It was spectacular. There wasn't a cloud anywhere around. It was just like you hear. You know, the mountain range along the coast holds the weather back, and on the coastal side of the mountains is the nastiest weather you've ever seen, and on the other side of the mountain range, it's absolutely spectacular. And that's what we had that day. We got over there, and it was absolutely beautiful.
Hey, Jeff.
Yeah.
All we're seeing is a map. Is that what we're supposed to be seeing?
Yeah, right now.
Okay, good. You were talking about all this beautiful stuff, and I was looking for photos. I just want to make sure we didn't have a glitch.
No, we're good right now. We got
right.
So this is going up the Yahtzee Glacier. You get on top of what's known as the Bagley Ice Field. And the Bagley Ice Field is an ice field that feeds dozens and dozens of glaciers. It's 134 miles long. It's absolutely breathtaking and beautiful place. And so we're up there, and this is where one of our interesting. So Mr. Plantz, I don't know if you want to jump in here and talk about it, but he's following me, and he's taking pictures at the same time he's following me. And all of a sudden, I get on the radio and I hear, hey, where'd you go? And this is a bunch of zigzagging while we're looking for each other on an ice field that's 134 miles long. It was just the start of the adventure. Here's some of the absolutely gorgeous mountains as we're flying through this area. So we get all the way into McCarthy, and we actually had a place to stay, but we were too early. We were, I think this is July 7th. I think we have an event there on the 16th. So we're way early. So anyway, we got connected with this guy named John Adams. He's got a great bed and breakfast there in McCarthy. I think it's called McCarthy Bed and Breakfast. If you get a chance, go see John. He's got a little strip at his place. It was an absolute wonderful thing. Here's our accommodations for the time we were in the McCarthy area. This is Gladys the bus. Gladys was spectacular. I mean, Gladys had a wood stove in it, had a sleeping area, had a cooking area, had everything you could want, and a huge upgrade from a tent, which we slept in some of the time on our trip. And even better yet, Gladys came with a wood-fired hot tub. So we had a few adult beverages and decided to do a little hot tubbing while we were up there. Really, really a fun time. And so we're getting up one morning out of Gladys and standing directly out of the door of the bus, our mom and two of her little guys here looking straight at us, posing for my picture. So while we're up there, this is kind of an interesting twist. most places in Alaska, we didn't have very good cell service or broadband, but in McCarthy, if you have Verizon, you have like full on LTE. And I'm up there and I see somewhere online, I think Bob Breeden is up there in McCarthy at the same time we are. So I sent him a message and here we are, we connect, and he's staying with this guy, Philip, on the left up here, who's got an interesting place out there. And we all get together at Philip's place. Philip's got a few airplanes, and Philip's got some yurts up on steel posts out in the park. Absolutely spectacular place, and we had a great time there. You can see he's got some bridges from yurt to yurt. But this is kind of how our trip went. We just kind of wandered around, ran into people, met some great people, and had just a fantastic time. So it's this is out in the middle of Wrangell St. Elias National Park. Not such a bad place.
So why are they all up in stilts?
Well, Jeff, can you answer that for us?
Yeah, they seem to have some bears there. So Philip had this whole compound made for himself, and at night he closes all the trap doors and he sleeps very well.
Yeah, it's an interesting place to say the least. And here's Philip and a friend of his, Marius, from Transylvania. We did some flying with them in the park and saw some sights. And here's Lucy Foster that was with Bob, and here we are at Philip's yurt, and we're having some copper red sockeye salmon freshly caught from a couple of days earlier. Again, this stuff, it just all kind of happened, but we had a wonderful time with Bob and Lucy. They invited us to stop and visit them later in our trip, and we did, and we'll show you some pictures from that. But just a spectacular time. So here's Bob on here, and then the young lady on the right is a young lady that we were. Another interesting story. We're at our bed and breakfast, and in the cabin adjacent to us is this young lady. She's Australian. She had just gotten back from a trek with a guide out in the mountains, 11 days wandering around in the glaciers. She is, I think, the stereotypical Australian, where she is just adventurous and they go off and do these epic tricks. Well, it turns out she's a professional violinist. So we said, hey, Liz, you want to come join us for dinner tonight? We're going to fly out to a yurt in the middle of the park and have some sockeye salmon. And she said, sure, I'd love to join you. Can I bring my violin? And anyway, we had a spectacular time. Liz played her violin for us that evening after dinner. And, my only regret is that we had to fly back and I couldn't have any adult beverages that evening. But no, this was, here we are in the middle of Wrangell St. Elias National Park, right? Our nation's largest national park. It's got 9 of the 16 highest peaks in the US in the park. I mean, this is an unbelievable place. And we're in a yurt listening to a beautiful Australian woman playing the most exquisite violin music for us after having a dinner of fresh sockeye salmon. All planned right from the get-go. Jeff Plantz, I mean, this was just unbelievable.
All you could do is just say, pinch me, pinch me. Yeah, it was incredible.
I remember we were sitting on like the sofa next to each other, and we're there, we're watching Liz play, we're listening. I said, and I don't know if this is live stream, so I said, hey, Jeff, I said, what the F planet are we on anyway? Anyway, it was pretty spectacular. Here's Caleb, and I can't remember his wife's name right now. He's the one that caught the fish and provided the great sockeye that night. And that's their beautiful young daughter. So we're in Wrangell St. Elias National Park. We're based in McCarthy, or near McCarthy. And this is a track of kind of some of the loops we did. We wandered around. We went back up to the Bagley ice field. We flew out fishing one day. We did a number of trips and had a great time. Here's a shot where we flew out to a little cub strip, and the cub strip was adjacent to a little mountain lake that we were told had a bunch of lake trout in it. So Philip and Marius flew out there in the cub on the left. I flew out, and then Mr. Plantz flew out his amphib. He landed in the water, and we all hopped on the amphib and proceeded to fish off the floats. And we caught all the lake trout we could eat. We caught lake trout after lake trout. So it was a fun day of fishing off the float plane. And there's Marius from Transylvania. And there's Mr. Plantz with a bucket of not the best display of our trophy lake trout that day, but we caught a ton of trout, and it was a great day. Again, you can kind of take a look at the weather behind us. Not a typical weather for that part of Alaska. Here's a picture of a flight down the Chitna River. The Chitna is one of the big rivers in the park, and it's I think I don't know which one. This is just where it goes around an island, but the scenery there is just spectacular. So while we're up there, we stumbled into this machine, and this was we met the gentleman that built it, and I'm forgetting his name at the moment, but he had just gotten the thing in the air. He flew up from, was it Washington State or Oregon? And it's a 4-place airplane. He had made the double ender prior to this, and this is actually, these are the wings off the double ender, but he decided to make a 4-place single engine instead. And so
Alec Wildenstein is his name.
Say again, I'm sorry.
It's Alec Wildenstein, I believe.
Okay, yeah, I think you're right. I remember Alec now. So we had fun talking with Alec and checking out his creation. It was actually absolutely a work of art. I mean, it was a beautiful, beautiful airplane. Unfortunately, we heard it maybe got itself a little wet, maybe the week after we saw it. This is a shot of Ma Johnson's hotel in McCarthy. Just a few random shots from McCarthy. McCarthy is, you know, it's a small town, a mountain town, down the end of a 60-mile dead end gravel road, and it's in the heart of the park, and it's got a lot of character. It's just got a ton of character. I really I enjoyed it. I could have stayed a lot longer there and just continued to fly around the park. We did a little tourist stuff. This is up at the park visitor center. They had a cast of a grizzly bear print that I was somewhat in awe of, and I had to take a picture of it. This is really cool. This is the Kennecott Mine, which is right up the road from McCarthy. This is an amazing, amazing place. So this was a copper ore mine that operated, I believe, from like 1909 to 1938. And they took out thousands and thousands of tons of super high grade copper ore. They ran it all out in 1938 and they abandoned everything. But it's now part of the park. They're rebuilding some of the buildings. It's an amazing place. We really enjoyed kind of wandering around some of the buildings. I could have spent another day or two there, to be honest. Here's another shot with some of the, I think that's something I read said it's like a 14-story high building in the back. And then I got a kick, you know, being from Wisconsin, a lot of the old early mining equipment was made in Milwaukee. So this is like some big Alice Chalmers mill that says Milwaukee, Wisconsin on it. Here's another one. Power and Mining Machinery Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. You know, here we are in the middle of nowhere in Alaska. So here we went up. This is the actual mines where they got the ore out of, up on the mountain above the buildings we just showed. Down here is actually the McCarthy airstrip. And we did a 4-wheeler ride up there one day just to check out the old mining stuff, and had a fun day. Here's a day where we were flying around the park and landed on the gravel bars on some of the rivers. I don't remember this one anymore. It was either the Nazina or Chitna River, but just had a blast landing on gravel bars and wandering around. For these days, a lot of times we'd leave the amphib back at camp and then just double up in my plane and go explore. So the really neat thing about the park is there's airstrips in the park, in the Wrangell St. Elias National Park, and a lot of them have cabins, free to use cabins on the airstrips. So we stopped and checked some of them out. We didn't stay at any of them. We had thought we might, but our accommodations in Gladys the bus were too comfortable, so we didn't stay in any of the cabins. But they were really they're primitive, but they got a wood stove and they got a little bunk, and they'll keep you dry and they'll keep the bears away from you. So it's really neat. I'd like to go back up there and check those out. So later on in that week, Al Clayton, the RAF liaison for the state of Alaska, had a work party on the Peavine Strip. He organized a work party, and so we participated. There's Al standing on the Peavine Strip, and we brushed this strip out. I think we had about 20 people there that day, and it was really neat because we had Park Service people with us. We had a bunch of volunteers, and we basically cut brush back all the way on I don't know if it's a 2,000-foot strip, but it was a heck of a big strip. There's a picture looking up these spectacular mountains that just shoot straight up right next to the strip. Again, the picture doesn't do it much justice. Here's a helio courier that one of the volunteers had that was shuttling some of the tools and people back and forth to the strip. And there's our very own Ted Waltman, lending a hand and digging in that day. We connected with Ted and his buddy Mike while we were up there. And Tom Lawhorn works at Airglass. I think he's the fiberglass shop supervisor. Tom, got to know Tom a little bit and had a good time with him. There's some of the crew from the strip that day. It was a great day. We really, if you could see the before and after pictures, and I wish I had them, of that strip, we cut a ton of brush. That strip didn't look anything like it did when we started. So that night, Al had a little gathering at Gladys, and we had maybe a few adult beverages and a great time. It was, got to meet a lot of really neat, interesting Alaskans. So we're kind of winding down our McCarthy part of the trip, and from here we head over to Anchorage, and McCarthy's here. It's about a 3-hour flight over to the Anchorage area, and so that's kind of where we went next. And then the last part of the trip, we were down here on the Alaska Peninsula, and we've got a few slides on that too. How are we doing on time? About halfway through the slides and halfway through the presentation. Sounds good.
Yeah. Jeff, you got all night as far as I'm concerned. These photos are amazing.
Thank you. So one night we flew up the Regal Glacier in Wrangell St. Elias, and it just was a no wind, beautiful blue sky night. It was absolutely spectacular. Here's a picture where we're heading out, and now we're flying up. So there's an easy way from McCarthy over to Anchorage, and the easy way would have been to follow the Chitna River. But we said, well, heck, that's not going to be enough fun. How about if we fly straight up the glaciers and up over the top around Mount Blackburn, not over the top of Mount Blackburn, but around Mount Blackburn, and kind of check things out there. And this was flying up the Kennecott Glacier, and you can't fly up it. So what you do is you fly to it, and then you start circling, and then you peel away and you do a circle, and then you do another circle, and then you do another circle. And if you're in a heavily loaded amphib, how many circles do you have to do to get up the glacier, Mr. Plantz?
A couple.
Yeah. So but you know what? The air was silky smooth. The scenery was spectacular. It was almost hands-free flying where you could just kind of bump the stick with your knees once in a while to turn. I mean, it was an unbelievable flight that day. And it was one of those things again, maybe we should go do this. You know, it was not planned, but we just did it. And we are so glad that we flew up and around and, you know, around the glacier. So then we get up here and we're now up on top. You can kind of see the ice field. You can't really get a good appreciation for it, but the peak in the upper left is Mount Blackburn. Mount Blackburn is 16,370 feet. I mean, and I think, I don't know, we're up here maybe 10 right now. So the perspective is all messed up. Maybe we're at 11. I don't remember. Jeff, do you remember?
Right around 10, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. But, you know, it was silk smooth air. And there's these knife edges of snow. And you can't help but just want to play around the ridge lines and have some fun. And again, you wouldn't do this with any kind of wind at all, but it was just silky smooth that day. It was one of those really memorable days of flying. And here we are. Jeff takes a picture of me. I think we're coming now down the back side of it. Here's a picture I got. This is a GoPro image, believe it or not. That's just a screen grab. This is coming back down the back side of Mount Blackburn, out the east side of the park, or I'm sorry, west side of the park. And this was the Katsina River Valley. And it was breathtaking. It was absolutely, again, a really fun day flying. So this kind of shows our course from there over to Anchorage. We wanted to go recalibrate, reprovision, hang out in Anchorage a little bit before our next adventure. That's Anchorage airspace. We don't need to look at it anymore. It's a complicated area. If you haven't flown there before, you know, that's the Matsu Valley and the number of private airstrips north of Anchorage. There's a lot of airplanes in this area. So you want to talk to some people and learn the area a little bit. It's not terribly difficult to fly, but you got to understand the airspace. Just a recommendation, get a hold of the chart supplement for Alaska. It lays out all the VFR procedures and helps you a lot. So while we were in Anchorage, you got to go to Stoddard's. I mean, Stoddard's, you know, for people, I'm sure there's some people on here, yeah, well, whatever, it's just Stoddard's, but it's the freaking Walmart for Super Cubs. I mean, it's every freaking part you could ever want for a Super Cub. And I don't know, I could have spent more time in there. It's an amazing place. So we picked up a few things, but we mostly wandered around and just checked things out. So the next part of our adventure was we were heading down to Lake Iliamna. We had been offered a place to stay on Lake Iliamna cabin. And Lake Iliamna is down the Alaska Peninsula. And so we were heading down there. That's our route on the way down. And you can see Anchorage is up here, if you can see my pointer. And then we flew across Turning Arm onto the Kenai Peninsula. We wanted to stop and visit Lucy and Bob Breeden down here. I landed on a beach in Nikiski, and Jeff Plantz landed on a little lake right next to it. And we stopped there and said hi. And then we continued on here through the Lake Clark Pass and down to Lake Clark, and then down here to Lake Iliamna. This is a picture of us having landed on the beach at Nikiski on Cook Inlet. Everything turned out just fine, but let me say, if it looks like it's got some slope to it, it's probably got more than you think. And if you see some lines that are going out from the beach, those are 1-inch diameter set net lines, and pay attention to where those are. I didn't hit any, I knew they were there, but it just stuff that you're not used to seeing in my part of the world. There's Jeff and Patty on the little lake that they landed on, right next to Bob and Lucy's little house up on the point in Nikiski. And there I am and Rhonda, my girlfriend, who joined us up there via a commercial flight. and Lucy and Patty Plantz in their tiny house with a beautiful view out over Cook Inlet. So here we are, Jeff and Patty refueling at Lake Clark at Port Ellsworth, a little bit further on the trip. Another place that's breathtakingly beautiful. I mean, the water really is that color. It's a neat place. We could have spent lots more time there exploring, but we went down to Lake Iliamna. And this is a picture. It's a little bit hard to see in this, but Lake Iliamna is a huge lake. I mean, it's I forget, it's 100 miles long or maybe just short of it. It's a huge lake, freshwater lake. I think they say it's one of the only freshwater lakes with seals and freshwater seals in it. What was interesting is there's a pass near here. The Alaska range comes down and there's a low spot and the wind goes through. You can see this side of the lake's got absolutely no wind. If you look in the distance, you can see where the water changes color. There's a reason for that. It can be crazily windy and it can change in just not very far. Here's a picture of the app windy. Here's Cook Inlet, and here's the wind coming up, and you can see it going right through this pass. On any given day, I can pick up windy, and I can see wind over Lake Iliamna that is this shade of red. It is, I think it's the windiest place in Alaska, although I'm sure some Alaskans who know better would argue with me, but it's a windy place. I was, when we were getting briefed for flying here, I was thinking ceilings and viz. And Gary McCarthy kept saying wind, wind, wind. And I never understood why he was talking about so much about wind. Well, now I do. It can be a wickedly windy place. So we're up here, we're at Iliamna, we're getting fuel one day, it's raining, and we run into another supercub.org member, a guy that goes by the name of Corvus Migrants. It was a gentleman from Germany. Really enjoyed chatting with him. You can see we're all bundled up. The rain is streaming off the wing. That's why we're all standing under the wing. But it was great meeting him. Another little side trip we did down on the Alaska Peninsula in Katmai National Park. This is the Valley of the 10,000 Smokes. It was a really interesting place, and I don't remember the details, but I think like 1912, a volcanic eruption happened here that spewed like 2,000 or 3,000 feet of ash into the valley. And now, all these years later, the ash is being eroded. It's otherworldly, to say the least. So that was a little day trip. You're supposed to be able to find spots out here that you can land. The weather was pretty scuzzy that day, so we didn't. We just headed back to the cabin. So on from there, we on another little side trip, we decided to go to Katmai National Park and what's known as Brooks Falls. And if you ever get a chance to go here, I highly suggest it. Now it's floats only. You have to either have a float plane, have a friend with a float plane that can shuttle you out there, or you have to pay somebody to get you out there. But I highly recommend this place. It's a really neat place to see. Let me see if I can get this. When you pull up to the beach, you see this and you start wondering that maybe this isn't a normal place, because that is a rock floating in Naknek Lake. And you say, I guess this isn't a place like I've ever been before. It's a pretty popular tourist stop, but don't let that stop you from going there. That's a shot of the float planes that fly in for the day with people to see the bears in the falls. And it's really a neat spot. Here's a picture that Patty took up. I think she took a hike one day. This is down looking at Brooks Lake on the right. The bay directly in the middle is a little bay where all the float planes land, and that's Naknek Lake. But just another, beautiful, beautiful spot. So the second thing that you might notice when you land and pull up on the beach with your float plane is, okay, we have floating rocks, but yeah, we got bears on the beach too. So it's kind of catches your attention. Those are the tails of float planes all tailed up on the beach, and you got a couple of brown bear cubs having fun with each other. And it was an interesting day. So there's a brown bear cub sniffing and licking the stinger on a 185 just down the beach from us. So here's 2 sows and I think six cubs between them, wandering around on the beach, not that far from you. It's kind of it's beyond an amazing place. The bears are so focused on fish, they really don't care much about the people that are there. So we got up to the falls. It was an absolutely spectacular day again. It was July 21st, and it was at the peak of the sockeye salmon run. The reds were running up the river here and up the falls. There were 22 bears in the falls this day. It was an absolute blue sky day, which for this part of the world, I think is pretty special. But we sat and we got to watch bears for a number of hours in the falls. If you've ever seen pictures of bears up there eating salmon, well, this is the place where a lot of these pictures get taken. It's a really neat spot. And you just sit there and you watch these bears eat fish after fish after fish. And they don't get every one, but they get quite a few. The park ranger said the bears put on like 30% of their body weight during this run. But it was fun. I'm not a very good photographer, so I try to make it up with a really good camera and a long lens, and had fun getting some pictures of the bears eating. And the bears are just fish after fish, jumping up, grabbing a hold. They take their turn, they stand out in these special spots, and they get a fish, they turn around, they walk away, they eat their fish, and then they come back. And based on their pecking order, they get the bigger bears, the ones that are higher in the whatever pecking order, get to push the other bears out of the way. There were times when there were 5 fish in the air all right around the bear. It was a good place. It was what do they say? This wasn't fishing, this was catching that day. They were doing well. So had a really fun time watching the bears, and this is just in camp too. They were wandering around the buildings in camp. Here's a mom and a couple of cubs wandering up the moms are really protective of the cubs. The male bears will attack them and eat them. So the moms are really keeping their distance from everybody else. So this takes us into another part of the story. So we're out at Brooks Falls, and Jeff Plantz shuttles Ron and I back to King Salmon, where we had to leave our plane because it was on wheels. And he came back to pick up Patty, and then the wind had come up a little bit. Jeff, you got your mic on?
Sure. Well, so this is like maybe Gilligan's Island. You start out for the 3-hour tour, then you stay for a week. Katmai Park is very interesting. The bears own the place. The trails are for the bears. So if they're coming down the trail, you move to the side, and much like Jeff said, they really don't care about us. But I would say for the first day or two, I had my bear spray. You're kind of like, this isn't quite right, this isn't quite real, but it's amazing. I mean, you're on the other side of the fence. They own the place and you're the tourist. So you have rangers with walkie-talkies that basically babysit you, and they get bear reports, and then they corral you away from the bears. So, we're spending the whole day being corralled, going across the bridge, Jeff and Rhonda shooting a zillion pictures. We are like, I don't know, buzzed up without alcohol. I mean, this is just a giddy day. It's 70 degrees. It's wonderful. And after, 10 days of incredible events in McCarthy and wherever, it just can't get better. You're just like, this is incredible, right? Well, so, I shuttled Jeff and Rhonda back to their place, and then they were going to fly over. And then Patty and I were going to fly out. We're going to go back to Gary's fish camp. Well, I'm coming in to pick up Patty on the island. And I don't know, I think about 7 o'clock at night or so. And when I landed at King Salmon, it had gotten sort of windy. So you kind of put that in your brain. I think it was like 180 at maybe 17 to 20 knots. And you're like, yeah, whatever. In Alaska, you have wind. It's just part of the deal. So I come back and I overfly the bay. And, we're from the Midwest. And usually when things get above 10 knots, you see these white things called white caps. And then you're a little more careful. Well, I fly over. I don't really see any white caps. But what was deceiving is just the scale here, and I'll, shoulda, woulda, coulda, whatever. So I land and I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. And the horizon's kind of bobbing and I'm thinking, oh, this is interesting. So I turn around, and that's usually kind of a precarious position, because if you get a crosswind, it's much kind of like a sailboat that the wind can lift you over. Well, I turn and I'm like, okay, and I'm looking at the shore, and then all of a sudden I would be looking down a wave, and then I would be looking up at the sky. And so I tried a couple of maneuvers to get myself into shore to pick up Patty. Well, at one point I'm looking, I don't know, maybe 60 degrees, looking at one of my floats, like diving. So it's kind of like DOS boat. So I heard the alarms going off, dive, dive, dive. And then everything slows down. You get into the mode where you've practiced a zillion times, master switch, seatbelt, headset, mixture control. And then the thing that you can't believe, at least in this instance, is how slow everything went. So the airplane goes upside down, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh, okay. And my doors pop up, so they just pop open. I step out. I barely get my ankles wet. So I pull my life jacket like I'm supposed to do. And then I'm standing there, and it's like, how did I get here, right? So I'm thinking, well, hey, I'm not dead. That's cool. And it takes like forever for the wings to fill up with water. So I'm just like hanging out, standing on my struts. And I look up, and I, thank God we were in the wilderness, but we weren't. The ranger boat comes out, picks me up. Patty's in the boat. Both kind of looking at each other like, oh, well, what the hell are you going to do? And so I get a ride back to the shore. And
what, were you wet up your knees, maybe?
My ankles. That's only because I slipped getting into the boat. So, I mean, the whole, you're worried about hypothermia, worried about getting injured, getting out of the airplane or whatever. So, I mean, I guess somebody was shining upon me, because that's how it looked. And then after about 10 minutes, that's how it settles in. But the first part's just like, I don't know, it's like rolling off your couch or whatever. It wasn't a big deal. So anyway, there we are. So things were a little more complicated, but the old saying, you get lemons, we'll make it into lemonade. People will think of this differently, but I now, from here, we had a week of staying at this incredible park. I don't think I would suggest this as a way to do it, or really I went there to get this hat. Steve holds these hats very, very tightly. It's a flip-flop hat. And later on, Steve can probably explain how you get these. But anyway, so the rest of the week.
I think you just told us how you get one.
You think so? Well, anyway, so the crew at Katmai, they're incredible. It's a very small ranger station. There's very few rangers. There's very small support crew, but they tied down my airplane. They anchored it. They got me in a boat. They gave Patty and I a cabin gratis. And the whole week, we just stayed there pretty much for free. Now, my bar bill and my food bill was high, but here I are at a 5-star resort that if you're a normal person, you can go for the day, fly out of Anchorage or fly out of King Salmon, and then you go home at night. But we were able to stay there for many nights. And normally you have to enter a lottery to go to Katmai Park. And you sit on the internet a year ahead and you try and reserve a cabin because they don't have very many. So here we have a cabin. The food there is incredible and very reasonable. I don't know how they do those two things. So we're at like a first class resort. And by the end of the week, I knew every ranger. I had met people from every international country you could think of. And I can't say how helpful and kind and courteous the staff there was. They were just really, really fun. And all the eating was family style. So you'd sit down at these long picnic tables and you'd get talking about, where you're from, who you are, da-da-da. And then they'd say, well, are you on your last day? And I would have to just sit there and kind of be quiet. And then they'd go, some people would get sad and some people would just start laughing because they'd say, oh, that's your airplane out there. And I'm like, yeah. So basically for the whole week, it was windy the whole week. So every morning I'd get up from my campsite and I'd walk by the beach and I'd see if my airplane had washed up on the beach or if it was still there. So that was kind of interesting. But, Patty and I got to tour the Valley of 10,000 Smokes. We did a lot of hiking, and we met a lot of bears and a lot of really, really neat people. But anyway, go ahead, Jeff. So there's my ranger friend. She took my pulse and my blood pressure, and she was just the kindest person. And there's something exciting about a woman wearing a gun, but what can I say?
Caitlin, right?
Yeah. And here, okay, this is what typifies Super Cub and aviators around the world. The gentleman sitting on the float in that really sexy suit there, the black suit, is Dave Calkins. He was flying a Turbine Otter, I think, that day.
Yep.
And that's his day job. And he runs in, he says, hey, at lunch hour, I'll help you. And I'm like, what? So he had this inflatable banana that he put under my tail. And on his lunch half hour, he takes off his work clothes, throws on his wetsuit, risks limb and whatever, and goes under the airplane and gets this whole thing set up. Did I ask him? No. He just noticed what was going on and he came to help. And he's a Super Cub guy. I mean, incredible. And here's the rest of the crew. We waited and waited and waited. It took until I think on Thursday afternoon for it to calm down.
And it happened that the flip over happened on a Saturday, right? So
Yeah.
Saturday to Thursday, waiting for the wind to stop.
So, you don't know where it was anchored. You didn't know what got busted up. The rollover was like super slow, but you just don't know where the bottom is. And the wind and the waves there are just crazy. So here we are starting to lift it up.
Can you see that all right?
Oh, here we go. So we had a crew from Katmai Air. Paul is an A&P. Ozzy's the head mechanic at Katmai Air. There's Dave Calkins putting the floater in. And the best thing about these guys is they've done this a few times. And so they're very patient and they work together really well and they wait for the right time. They don't risk your airplane and they don't risk you. Because there's really no resources out here. There isn't, there's one cell phone that worked for the Rangers once in a while. The internet was terrible. And so you really don't have any contact with reality. So here's the crew. We're using a rope along.
I'll try to play that again.
Okay. Oh, it's got to load?
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure what I'm doing here.
Yeah. So what these guys do is they bury your floats kind of in the sand. We got lucky, the bottom was sandy. And then we have this come along, rope along, and you just very slowly rotate the thing up on the tip. So we had a lot of visitors. But the most incredible thing is we were out there probably 6 hours trying to get this thing up. And we had all this junk on the beach. We basically had like beach toys for the bears. And only one bear came down and sniffed around, and then he left after he yelled at him. But I thought, that everything just would have been trashed, but we got really lucky again. It was incredible. So the tree didn't break, and we just kept going. I don't know whose butt that is. I guess that's mine. So slowly it comes up. Boy, the tail looks good. The wings look good. I'm like, Jeff Russell's already starting to whisper in my ear, "You're going to fly that thing out of here." And I'm like, I'm going to fly this out of here? So you're kind of curious about this whole thing. So it's coming up. Beautiful day. And it's tipping. So we were kind of the entertainment that morning. A lot of people shot pictures, and there we are. And then basically the insurance guys came through, and they drained out the mags and dump all the junk out of the engine, sumped everything. And by that afternoon, late in the evening, because it's light till midnight, we had it fired up.
Yeah, I think we were on the water at 6 a.m. Or 6:30, and we had it running by 4 p.m. So it was a lot of work that day, but we got it going. And Paul Erickson was the guy that came out and helped. He brought a guy named Ozzy, who actually worked at the very lodge. He was a mechanic for the lodge that maintained all the turbine otters and beavers and all that, worked with Dave Calkins. But Ozzy came out and helped. Paul Erickson these guys were great guys to work with. And, they kind of looked at us like, okay, here's the goofballs that got themselves into this. And we're like raring to go to help them. And I think they kind of look at you a little, I wonder about these guys. And, after they saw, we knew what we were doing. It was just great teamwork. All four of us just hit this airplane and worked on it all day. I remember, draining the water out of the tanks and wondering if how many gallons they actually held, because there was a lot of water in this thing. And then sumping the tanks for 2 hours straight, trying to get all the BBs of water out of the system. But at the end of the day, we had the thing running. And then
The only thing we lost was the spinner, but hey, so what?
Jeff, I remember, so that night here we are, take the whole day, we get the thing up. Now the worst thing is, though, the next day he's going to fly it out, right? Wind comes back up, he can't go. So now he's stuck there another day. I'm already in King Salmon waiting for him, but the wind finally went down and he flew it out of there, and we reconnected, and all was good. Here's a picture.
There's the repair crew.
Go ahead. Yeah, Jeff and Paul Erickson, Ozzy on the right, myself and Patty. I think we were, I don't know, this must have been later in the day. I don't know if this was later in the day when we were smiling, feeling pretty good about how far we had gotten, or what.
No, this was in the morning.
Oh, okay. Well, we were very optimistic, I guess.
So we were pretty happy on Friday night, or at least I was really happy. And by this time, I think I had a pretty good tab at the bar. And so I had every one of the staff from the Ranger group and all the volunteers who I'd really got to know well over the week. They signed my helmet for me, and I have that at home now as a souvenir. Almost as nice as my Super Cub hat. So we're not sure, we were talking about Gilligan's Island. That's my tall Ranger friend. His job at night was to go out with a dart gun, and he'd shoot bears in the butt with tranquilizers. And they were doing a genetic study to try and figure out where the bears had come from. So during the day, I had plenty of time, and you just got to meet a lot of very interesting, fun people.
Yeah, and they had a lot of bear cams at various places around the park. So some of the people were able to watch bear cams and the whole process of pulling the airplane out of the water.
And so there's the airplane now. Still flies pretty well. We have higher buoyancy floats now, which is a nice thing to have. Staying on the upright is easier than being in that upside down state of mind. Wow.
Yeah, and real quick, I threw a little slide together and some trip trivia. You know, this is my hours on my plane, but it's 113 hours during the trip, about 9,000 miles, 700 gallons of fuel. You know, we paid $9.41 a gallon in king salmon, and $4.15 in Springfield, Minnesota. So all in all, about $5 a gallon. Wasn't a big trip. So this is just a slide to thank everybody that was so instrumental in the trip, helpful, just people we ran into, people we shared the adventure with, and people that we called for advice when we were looking for help. I'm not going to go through the full list, but lots and lots of people. The aviation community is absolutely fantastic. The supercub.org community is even better. That's it.
Well, Jeff, the only people you forgot on there are the FAA, at least in Alaska. You know, I had a few conversations with them afterward. When you first get that certified letter in the mail, you know, you kind of don't want to open it, but I opened it, called the FAA office in Anchorage, and over, I would say, most 15 minutes, we had a very nice conversation about what would you do next and how would you avoid this extracurricular activity, and that was case closed. Again, you know, nothing was really broken, nobody was hurt, so that kept things really simple. But you still really appreciate professional, open-minded people. And also Kevin Wyckoff, he's a insurance claims adjuster in Alaska. The guy was fabulous. The day after we got back to Anchorage, he showed up at our hotel room at 8 o'clock in the morning to start processing everything. And, you know, I can't say enough again, that Alaskan aviation community, those people are just spectacular.
Hey, Jeff, is that your last slide?
It is.
Why don't you unshare your screen and we'll see if anybody has any questions.
You're over my head. Roger, told me it's too dark in there. So that's why I turned the light on.
I can do that for you, actually.
Do it for me because I'm having a hard time with it right now.
Well, I say I can do it. Let's see if I can figure it out.
How about that?
Stop
Pause.
participants sharing. There we go. Okay.
How'd that work?
No, we got her done. So I'm just looking here, see if anybody has any questions for these guys. You know, we're just awesome presentation. The photographs are amazing. The bear pictures are out of this world. I mean, you just can't even begin to imagine what that must be like to be there. So really incredible. And thanks for your time tonight. If somebody has any questions for Jeff and Jeff, or the Jeffs from Wisconsin, you can do your little hand raise thing there. So I do have one question, Jeff Plantz. What do you have to do to the motor, that sort of thing, after you've got this airplane underwater? I mean, what happens next after that?
Well, let's just say that the fall afterwards, I went through a lot of systems. You know, you of course resump everything again, run it hard. I changed the oil as soon as I left King Salmon. We changed it in Anchorage again. And then as soon as I got home, I changed it again. Then I had a friend bore scope it. Everything looked happy in there because it was upside down. It was filled with water and you didn't have air in there. So corrosion really didn't get going. I also rebuilt the prop governor, sent the prop in. Of course, you know, everything inside, all the radios were toast. All the instruments were toast, all the switches. So I had to go through and replace all of those components. But the engine, to this day, I think when we left Alaska, we had about 600 hours on it. Now I have close to 900. Compressions are still good. I got lucky, I guess.
So we got back to Anchorage on Sunday and started ordering parts and started repairing what we could repair. And we had everything out of the airplane by Sunday night that we thought needed replacing, and started driving around in a rental car around Anchorage to try to look for parts on Monday morning, ordered what we couldn't find locally, had things next day aired. By the end of the day on Wednesday, we had the airplane completely buttoned up, ready to go.
Huh. So somebody asked too, what exactly caused the front compartments to fill up with water?
Oh, it wasn't the front compartment. It was just these huge waves. And if you ever look at a Google Earth where I was, the south wind just really got channeled through kind of a Venturi effect, these big waves. And like I think Jeff said early in the presentation, Gary said, when you go down the peninsula and you have an ocean on each side, you're going to just get crazy winds. And if they come up, get the hell out of there. Well, my sense of getting the hell out of there wasn't quite right on. So even though everything looked flat, as the wind pushed basically this mass of water toward the bay, it made contact with the bottom, and you just get these huge, wide amplitude waves. And I was basically going down one trough, I think, and Patty probably saw this better than I, because I was like, what the hell? I got a real nice tailwind at the time, and I just had this slow-mo rotation, and nothing filled up with water. It just went upside down.
Yeah, there was also a crosswind that caught you.
Yeah, it was just all over.
So another question. So what has to happen before you fly it back out? Do you need a ferry permit? Does the FAA come out? Do you have to go through an inspection? Or are things different in Alaska?
Things are different in Alaska, but since I built the airplane and I have the repairman certificate,
right?
We got into a little discussion with the FAA about we need a ferry permit. We're like, no way. And so basically Jeff called Joe Norris at EAA, and he said, no, you're the builder. You sign yourself off. And, Jeff gave me his iPad, so I had instruments, and Ozzy gave me a handheld, and we're off and running.
I'll be darned.
Joe was super helpful because we were already in a discussion with the FAA, and the FAA was asking some pretty tough questions. The FAA in Alaska felt a ferry permit was required, and we didn't have one. I called Joe Norris, and Joe Norris said, ferry permits are never applicable to experimental aircraft, period. And I got back to the FAA with that, and they grumbled a lot when I told them that, and they said, we'll have to see, and then they got quiet and never heard from them again.
So somebody else asks, any regrets about flying on floats and wheels? And the only thing I would point out is that you did both, because one of you flew up on wheels and one of you flew up on floats, and you didn't really talk much about the fact, but you went to places where you and Jeff were flying around together in your airplane, Jeff Russell, and then in other times you were flying around in Jeff Plantz's airplane, because you sort of had the best of both worlds. Do you want to talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, we kind of, at first thought this could be an odd couple thing, but when we talked about it, our airspeeds are pretty much the same. We both have the same first names, so greetings and meeting people was really easy. And, what the hell, that was good enough for me. And we knew that sometimes we would park, and sometimes, we trade off for whatever. And, and we really didn't care. We didn't have a set plan. We improvised, and I think we pulled it off pretty good.
Well, we lucked out. I mean, we had a lot of places where, like when we were staying down on Lake Iliamna, Lake Iliamna, the place we were staying, there was an 800-foot long cub strip. It was rough, and it was a big tired cub strip. But right behind the cabin was the little landing lake. And so Jeff and Patty landed in the lake and we landed on the Cub Strip. So, I mean, it just, things worked out. And then, you know, we flew to King Salmon together, or in each of our airplanes. I dropped my airplane in King Salmon and Jeff proceeded to shuttle everybody out 24 miles out to Katmai, in Brooks Falls. You know, out in Wrangell St. Elias National Park. We had found the day where we flew out. There was a little Cub Strip adjacent to a lake. I landed on the Cub Strip. He landed in the lake. I hopped on the floats. We went fishing. So, I mean, it opened up opportunities. You know, one day we did gravel bars. He parked his airplane. We went and just jumped in mine and we did gravel bars in Wrangell St. Elias. So it worked out really, really well.
So Roger Stuckey asks, when are you going back?
As soon as possible.
Yeah, Patty wasn't in the plane when it flipped over, right?
No, she's on the beach. I was picking up my girlfriend.
It was hard to watch.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. I don't see any other questions here, and we just want to thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Sharing this experience with us. That is really incredible, and I know it for me, and I'm sure for Laura, makes her want to go up there even more. And so we're looking forward to making that trip someday, as I know a lot of other people are. So thanks again, and appreciate your time, and have a great evening. Thanks everybody for being here and listening in too.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.